Reactive intimacy anorexia. That's what we're going to talk about today. This is a really big issue for those who struggle with intimacy anorexia, because there's those who are intimacy anorexics and those that are reactive intimacy anorexics. That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, I'm Dr. Doug Weiss. I'm the Executive Director of Heart Counseling Center in Colorado Springs. I'm also the President of the American Association for Sex Addiction Therapy. And we train counselors all around the globe to treat intimacy anorexia, which is a term that I coined and trademarked because it's something very unique that we see in the addiction field. So I want to talk about reactive intimacy anorexia. So let's talk about intimacy anorexia first. Intimacy anorexia is the active withholding of spiritual, emotional, and sexual intimacy. The characteristics: they're too busy for their spouse, they blame their spouse, they withhold love, praise, sex they disconnect from, or they withhold it. They're unwilling to share their emotions, they disconnect spiritually, they use anger and silence as a way to control, they have ongoing or ungrounded criticism, they tend to sometimes control around money issues, but the spouse always feels married and alone. And there's lots of material on this. You can go to intimacyanorexia.com and there's lots of information for both the intimacy anorexic and the married alone. But the reactive intimacy anorexia, if you want a whole hour on that, that is at asat.org, AASAT.org, and it's part of the intimacy anorexia training. Now, intimacy anorexia, okay, let's talk about addiction in general. If you're an alcoholic and you marry an alcoholic, some people never become alcoholics. They might be codependents, they might actually be healthy and just not deal with your addiction, okay? But some become alcoholics. Over time, they start drinking and they start doing the same behaviors and they start coping the same way, medicating the same way. Now, the same is true with intimacy anorexia. You might be married to one and you stay perfectly healthy. I've seen men and women who really are healthy, they have no anorexia symptoms, they've been married for 20 years to a really solid intimacy anorexic, and there's no impact on them. I've seen others who medicate in other ways, food, workaholism, other ways, and some actually become anorexics themselves. But it's reactive. It's not who they are, and they generally don't have some of the characteristics of an intimacy anorexic. They generally do not have a sexual addiction. They generally were not sexually abused. They generally have a good relationship with the opposite gender parent, okay? And they tend to come from good families. And so their core is not the same. However, they can react to intimacy anorexia with intimacy anorexia. Now, it can be that you have two drunks, and it can be also that our research on partner betrayal trauma shows that after disclosure of a sex addiction, that women tend to increase in symptoms of intimacy anorexia, to feel safe, to have some distance to heal. And so it may not be truly reactive intimacy anorexia. It may be a result of the betrayal trauma. And that's something else that has to be fettered out. Now, however, if you are acting in an intimacy anorexic way, you're going to have to work on that. Now, the good news is this. A reactive intimacy anorexic, they can say they're sorry, they can say they're wrong, and they tend to really respond to the techniques of healing intimacy anorexia. Doing the dailies, 2 feelings, 2 praises and prayer, connected sexuality, dating, working through the workbooks. They tend to be able to really go through it rapidly because it's not, their foundation is they really want to be connected, where intimacy anorexics really want to be safe. And so that's different. And so the reactive intimacy anorexic, you know, and sometimes they'll fight that they're anorexics, but they are, they think they can heal better, they can heal quicker, because it's not really who they are at their core. It is a reactive state, just like the alcoholic who is drinking because they're married to an alcoholic. They can generally stop alcohol a lot quicker than someone who's really an alcoholic who's been using it their whole life. So there is differences in the way that they heal, okay? And the intimacy anorexic who is reactive, their definition is the same: actively withholding spiritual, emotional, and sexual intimacy from their spouse as a reaction to the spouse's intimacy anorexia. And therefore it's different. And also the reactive intimacy anorexic has had long-term relationships. where generally intimacy anorexics don't have that before marriage, unless they're long distance. The reactive intimacy anorexia has had intimate sexuality if they were sexual prior to marriage in long-term relationships and having satisfying sexuality. And so those are different than someone who is an intimacy anorexic. So regardless of how you got there, if you are acting in an intimacy anorexic way, you want to do some of the intimacy anorexia materials, not necessarily the married and alone materials first, because you want to heal this piece. Okay, then get into the married and alone materials because you definitely have suffered a trauma as a result of being in a relationship with an intimacy anorexic. That's valid. And you're gonna have hurt and anger, and that's valid. And you're gonna feel misunderstood and sometimes misdiagnosed. Okay, that's valid. However, if any of those characteristics you're using, you wanna stop deploying those as a reaction, heal, deal with your feelings, deal with the trauma, deal with the anger, deal with your grief, deal with your losses, deal with the feelings of being unwanted and rejected and unheard and unseen. You're gonna walk through a healing process. But hopefully this helps you to maybe differentiate that. And if it is you, you wanna just, okay, I need to deal with those issues. And if the intimacy anorexic doesn't get better, it's gonna make it really hard. So you might wanna do an intensive. You could easily do a intensive just for yourself or as a couple. You can do phone counseling. We have groups for married and alone. We have groups for intimacy anorexia. We have Facebook groups. There's lots of stuff you can do. Get the books, Intimacy Anorexia, the workbooks, do that, or the videos. Please subscribe because there's a lot of information on intimacy anorexia on our YouTube channel. You can get a lot of that information. And there's this comment button down here as well. Please write a comment and I will try to respond to you as soon as I possibly can because we want to hear from you and we want to be able to share back with you. Our heart is for you to heal, whether you're a reactive intimacy anorexic or an intimacy anorexic. Either one, you want to have a better life. You want to have a life where you really do feel loved and feel connected spiritually, emotionally, and sexually. You feel wanted in a relationship. Your marriage is organic. Now that can happen if people are willing to do the work. If someone's not willing to do the work, they can't get better, okay? But anyone who wants to get better can move towards that organic connectedness. I've been working with intimacy anorexic for over 30 years. I've seen success in many couples who do the work. They have the happily ever after. So if this has helped you maybe to differentiate why you're acting this way and encourage you that you can heal quicker, I am so glad that we could do this for you. And if there's anything we can do, call my office, 719-278-3708. We would love to talk to you.